Ethan Caldwell stood just inside the doorway of his sprawling suburban home, his expensive briefcase slipping from his hand. It landed softly on the marble floor, but he didn't hear it. His heart was pounding too loudly. For years, this house had been a symbol of his success. High ceilings, polished surfaces, everything controlled and predictable. But now, something was different. Something unexpected. He had come home early because a meeting ended sooner than planned. It almost never happened. His life ran on schedules, deadlines, and numbers. People often said Ethan Caldwell had everything: money, status, influence. What they didn't say, what they couldn't see, was how lonely that everything felt. From the hallway, Ethan heard voices coming from the living room. A woman's gentle tone, a child's soft laughter. Confused and alarmed, he took a few slow steps forward. What he saw made him stop breathing. His housekeeper, Maria, was sitting on the floor with two small children. One was drawing with colored pencils on scrap paper. The other leaned against her side, eyes half closed, clearly exhausted. Nearby, a pot of soup simmered on the stove, filling the air with a warm, familiar smell Ethan couldn't remember noticing in years. For a moment, his mind jumped to anger. Who were these people? Why were they here? His home was his sanctuary, his controlled space. But then he saw Maria's face. She looked tired. Not the usual quiet, professional tiredness, but the deep exhaustion of someone carrying far more than their share. Still, she smiled at the children with a tenderness that stopped Ethan in his tracks. Before he could speak, the older child looked up and noticed him. "Maria," the little girl whispered. "Who's that?" Maria turned, her eyes widening when she saw Ethan. She immediately stood up, panic flickering across her face. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't know you'd be home. I was just—" Ethan raised a hand, not to stop her, but because he needed a second to steady himself. "Who are they?" he asked quietly. Maria hesitated. The children clung to her now, sensing the tension. Finally, she took a breath. "They're my sister's kids," she said. "My sister passed away last month. Cancer. It happened so fast." Her voice trembled, but she continued. "I couldn't leave them alone today. Their school was closed, and I couldn't afford childcare. I was afraid to ask for time off." The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. He looked at the children again. They weren't making a mess. They weren't loud or disruptive. They were just existing. Seeking comfort. Seeking safety. Something in Ethan's chest tightened. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked. Maria lowered her gaze. "A few weeks. And you didn't say anything." "I didn't want to risk my job," she said honestly. "This job helps pay their rent, their food, everything." Ethan felt a sudden wave of shame wash over him. He had spent the afternoon arguing over a business deal worth millions, numbers on a screen, money he didn't truly need, while the woman who cleaned his home, who made his life easier every single day, was quietly carrying the weight of two grieving children alone. He looked around his immaculate living room. The art on the walls cost more than most people made in a year. The furniture was perfect, untouched. And yet, the room had never felt more alive than it did right now. "Please," Maria said softly, tears forming in her eyes. "If you want me to leave." "No," Ethan said quickly. The word surprised even him. "No, that's not what I want." He knelt down slowly, bringing himself to the children's level. The little girl stared at him with cautious curiosity. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lily," she said. "And you?" he asked the younger one. "Ben," the boy murmured, rubbing his eyes. Ethan smiled. A real smile, not the polished one he used in boardrooms. "I'm Ethan," he said. "And, you're welcome here." Maria covered her mouth, tears finally spilling over. That evening, Ethan did something he hadn't done in years. He stayed home. They all sat at the dining table together. The long table that had once hosted lavish, empty dinners now held simple bowls of soup, unevenly sliced bread, and laughter. Lily proudly showed Ethan her drawing, a picture of a house with stick figures holding hands. "That's us," she said. "A safe house." Ethan swallowed hard. After dinner, when the children had fallen asleep on the couch, Ethan and Maria talked. She told him about her sister, about the hospital visits, the promises made too late. She told him how scared she was, of failing the children, of losing her job, of not being enough. Ethan listened, not as an employer, as a human being. That night, long after Maria and the children left, Ethan sat alone in his office. The silence felt different now. He realized how many chances he'd missed to see people, not as roles or functions, but as lives filled with stories, struggles, and quiet courage. The next morning, Ethan made calls. Not to investors, not to lawyers, but to people who could help. By the end of the week, Maria was offered paid time off, flexible hours, and full financial support for the children's schooling. Ethan set up a trust fund for Lily and Ben, ensuring they would never have to worry about basic needs again. When Maria found out, she broke down. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. Ethan shook his head. "You already have," he replied. "You reminded me what matters." Months passed, and something changed, not just in Maria's life, but in Ethan's. His home became warmer, louder, fuller. He started volunteering, quietly funding community programs, showing up instead of just writing checks. He learned that kindness wasn't a weakness, and generosity didn't diminish success, it gave it meaning. One evening, Lily looked up at him and said, "You came home early that day." "I think that was on purpose." Ethan smiled. So did he. Because sometimes, life changes not when we plan it, but when we arrive a little earlier than expected, and choose compassion over control. And in that choice, we don't just help others find a home.